background how there's a picture of separated white and black water fountains?
So you got around the age of 13, then something happened. Everybody knew that they were black and white and you could play together. But that was my world. That's what I knew. That's what I understood. But when White's Only Fountain, that was part of the landscape. But something happened one day. My grandmother and I were going into town, and a white kid and I, we were on the same bus together. And we ran to our...
Can everyone see it clearly?
Now, one thing about drinking in an open fountain, it's not very cool. But I noticed something after I stopped drinking. This kid kept drinking, and drinking. So, in the mind of a 7-year-old, I said, wow. I looked at his sign above his fountain that said whites only. He was drinking. And I said, this water must be better. I had to taste it. So, that's why this notion of white water must be better. It's something in that I had. If I had my wish list for what I would like, what we would like, readers of this book is to, number one, believe that anything is possible. Two, not to be relegated to what others think about you, or where you should be, or where you should be, and moreover, where you want to go. We look at this project as being one of inspiration, being one of success, motivation, and most of all,
And we already talked about Bill Cosby. We already kind of referenced him, but he did read the book and he did review it. All right, and kind of probably wondering why that book. I actually just recently read this book and I loved it. I mean, it was a picture book. You know, I've not read a picture book in quite some time, but I loved this book. I thought it was great. I thought it really spoke to the time period and what people were thinking about. You know, the everyday things that were different for us back then. And I thought it had a very interesting ending. So I want you to turn to the very first page of your packet. I specifically put this on the back side, make you have to flip back and forth. It says Crystal Ball Predictions. Given what we've been going over so far, what the time period was like, what people were thinking, feeling, and just basically overall, you know, structure of things, the way things were, what do you think a story like this would end like? It talks about a young boy who, there we go. It talks about a young boy who goes, you know, he was talking about it, and it was the author's story. It's based on his life when he was young, in the 60s, he's older. It's the true story of him and his grandmother going into town down south, I believe, Alabama. And it's a very hot day in the summer, and he's thirsty. And they go into town, and he wants a drink of water. But because of segregation, he has to go to the black designated water fountain, and the white boy has to go to the white designated water fountain. But when he, you know, when young Michael tastes the water, it's awful. It's disgusting. It's murky, and it has like an iron metal taste. Have you ever tasted water with metal flavor? Like it doesn't taste right. And he sees the white boy drinking water and thinks, you know, he's really drinking this water. It must be great. It must be delicious. It must be cold and fresh. And, you know, he gets to drink that water and I don't. And he just becomes, you know, really curious about this. You know, why? So I want you to think of, you know, how do you think this book would end? A book like that would end. But I also want you to think of how does that relate to the first video? You know, I said the first video kind of sets the stage, so to speak, for what we were going to be learning, but it tells you a lot about the time. You know, there was segregation, there was inequality. You know, people didn't get to say what they wanted, or, you know, without fear of being, you know, for lack of better terminology, you know, in trouble with the law because of who you were that you didn't control, if that makes sense for everyone. So think of how this video, the book commercial, talking about a young African-American boy in the South in America during the 1960s, has anything to do with the first video, which talks about the civil rights movement in America in the 1960s. And I'm going to give you a minute or two. I would like you guys to share when you're done, 1 or 2 people. Give you, yeah, a minute or 2. Matt, if you have some things you jotted down, what are your thoughts? How do you think that book would end?
The author seemed like he was pretty, like, the author seemed like he was pretty, like, happy. Like, you know,
Okay.
everything.
The author,
It
you're
made me
talking about, you know, the adult Michael. Okay.
It led me to believe that it's, well, I don't want to say a happy ending, but it made me seem like, obviously things worked out, he got his water.
Okay.
But maybe, like, also, but then there's that part of it where I'm like, okay, it's going to be that easy. I'm sure maybe he got caught or something.
Right.
Maybe someone called him out on it or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
You know, it couldn't have, it didn't, you know, he didn't go from being that
Yeah.
young and
so I'm sure he
wondering to
yeah.
all of a sudden, you know, an adult.
I'm
So
sure
there were times
yeah.
in between there.
So I'm sure he'd just stroll right over to the,
Okay.
I'm sure he'd just stroll right over to the water fountain and be like, oh, I'm going to take a sip of this water.
And how do you think it relates to the first video we watched? Was there anything specific in the first video that you noticed?
The only thing that really caught my mind was like, I don't know if it sounds right, but I feel like maybe like a lot of African American people were afraid, maybe.
Fear.
Not,
Okay.
I mean, not like, I should say, yeah, some fear.
Concerned,
But some
maybe?
fear because the thing is too, like, a lot of African American people probably didn't know like the repercussions of what, you know, even something as simple as drinking from a water fountain, you can go to jail for that.
Unknown
Yeah.
consequences. Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
even drinking from water fountain, you can go to jail for that.
Yeah, that's a problem, right?
Oh yeah.
Hey, does anyone else have something to share? Lee in the back.
I agree with Matt that he possibly could have gotten in trouble for drinking from the white water fountain.
Okay.
And I thought maybe afterwards his grandma might have tried to explain to him the situation. And then another thought I had was that maybe he just finds out by drinking from their water fountain that theirs isn't any different than his.
Wow, that's good.
I want to add on something that he said.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of elaborated what I elaborated on.
Right.
But I'm going to elaborate more on what he did.
Okay, so we're gonna go further.
The thing is,
Awesome,
dude,
great.
I think he was 7, wasn't he? How old was he?
He was like 9.
The thing is, too,
He was young.
I feel like he was too young to even know the consequences. So
Okay.
you think if he would have got caught, his grandma probably could have got more trouble than he would have.
Right.
Because, like, he's 9 years old, so he probably doesn't know any better.
Right.
But, you know, if he were to get caught, you know, it's like, it could fall on his grandma and you're like, why'd you let your colored kid, you know, drink from this white
Right.
fountain?
Okay. Okay.
You know,
I see where you're going with this.
Unless it was like a secretive thing where the grandma didn't know.
Okay.
We don't know that because we haven't read
So
the
as we
book.
think about this, we're thinking about the ending.
Yeah.
And why the ending would be that way because of, you know,